All right, how's it going, y'all? So today we're going to be going over how to set up a Synology NAS as a true cloud using Synology Drive. So this is basically going to mimic the functionality of like Google Drive or Dropbox, where you essentially can have all the files cloud synced to your computer, but they're not downloaded until you click on them. Through Synology Office, you can also basically make your own Google Drive where you have multiple people collaborating on the same file, and it's all just saved on the web interface, really like how Google Drive works. There's also a component of this that is much like Google Drive where there's the My Drive, where essentially every single person will have their own little space on the NAS, which is just where their stuff goes. So that way they don't have to clutter up other people's things, and whoever's logged in sees their own folder. And we're going to go over that in depth because it can be a bit confusing. Now I will say, this is not necessarily for everyone. This works great for most home users and most business applications, especially where you've got remote employees. But where this gets a little difficult is specifically when you're trying to video edit off of this, and you just have to be very disciplined. I go over all of that in a different video, but for the most part, this workflow works great for graphic designers and other things like that who just need to access their files. And it's really great for home users especially because you don't want to worry about are you on the network or are you remote. You just want to be able to open up your PDFs and your tax documents and things like that wherever you are from either your phone or your computer. And that's exactly what we're going to be going over here. All right, so the first step is we're going to go ahead and install Synology Drive. So go ahead and log into DSM right here and then just go into the Package Center and search Drive and install Synology Drive Server. So now that we've installed this, it has installed 3 different packages. Synology Drive, which is the web interface, which is essentially just think of it like Google Drive or Dropbox, that same web interface. It's where you actually access your files and share links and things like that. Synology Drive Share Sync, which allows you to sync 2 Synologies together using Synology Drive. So you can have a Synology in another office and they stay in sync. And so that way, if one person modifies a file on one NAS, as soon as possible, it is modified in the exact same way on the other NAS. And finally, Synology Drive Admin Console, where we set all of this up. We're also going to install one additional package called Synology Office. So essentially, Synology Office is your documents as well. So this way you can actually edit documents in the web interface. No, it's not like you can edit Word documents and then save them on your computer and edit them as a Word document on their computer. Now, this is really designed just like Google Drive, where if you want to create a document here, it's really designed to be only editable on the web interface of Synology Drive or on the app. So this is not necessarily going to be for everyone. They are putting a lot of work into this and it is getting a lot better, but it is not necessarily for every single person because it is not like you can just save Word documents here. You have to kind of convert them and back and forth. Now, while this is installing, I do want to add one additional caveat. You have to have Synology Drive installed if you want to install Synology Office. If you just go straight to Office and hit install, it'll actually install Synology Drive, but it is actually just an addition to the Synology Drive package rather than its own individual package, if that makes sense. All right, so now that all those packages are installed, let's go ahead and first dive into the Synology Drive Admin Console, where we can go ahead and essentially get our little tour. And it's going to first take us to our team folder and we're going to see that nothing's enabled. So I have not enabled the home folder already. If you have, it would show up as enabled here. And we can see that we've got a bunch of our different shared folders right here that we can choose to add versions to and enable them in Synology Drive. So first off, let's go ahead and just say, all right, we're going to use the management and the HR folder for this. Now we have the option to set up version control. So version control is a lot like Google Drive or Dropbox version control. In the web interface, you can see all the edits and go back to them in time. And you've got a few different options here. First off, how many versions you're keeping of a given file. And then how do you want to rotate them when that number's hit? Do you want to rotate the earliest versions or do you want IntelliVersioning? So if you do the earliest versioning, you're basically always going to have the 8 most recent edits. If you do IntelliVersioning, what it's going to do is it is essentially going to keep 1 or 2 old ones and then a little bit more of the recent ones. So you're going to have them spread out a little bit more rather than your just most recent 8. Then for everybody, I would really recommend checking this box right here, rotate versions regularly, because if you don't, you basically never get these versions back and they never get removed. For people who are going to have tens of thousands of files, I do not recommend enabling versions here because it does have a significant amount of overhead required to do it, because there has to be a database that contains every single file and every single version of that file. And so in general, unless this is just going to be around 1,000 files, I would not generally enable versioning unless you really have a need for it. From my experience, most people don't use it, and a much better version of versioning that does not have any overhead to it is snapshots. And I've talked about that in a zillion other videos. But for this case, we're actually going to just leave versioning enabled just for the sake of this demo. But watch out for your performance there if you do have a ton of files and you need the fastest performance. There is also the new security tab where you can actually go in and set up additional pieces here where you can say how often people can download it and things like that. And we'll go ahead and add in our advanced features to go over that as well. That is much more of a business feature though, so most home users probably do not want it. So now the way these permissions work is exactly the same as they work in FileStation or on SMB. The users all are set up there, and you'll notice, well, I just missed it, in the upper right hand corner over here, we saw it indexing. There's not a ton of files in here, so it indexed very quickly. But if you've got thousands of files, it can take a while to index these, especially if there are a ton of videos and photos, because actually what it does is it has to generate a JPEG preview and index every single one of the files for each file. So that way, in the Synology Drive web interface, you can see a quick thumbnail without having to download the 30 megabyte file. All right, so now that we've got those two team folders enabled, let's go ahead and open up the Synology Drive app. This is that Google Drive interface that really, as you can see, it's trying to act a lot like Google Drive. So we can see the two shared folders we enabled as Synology Drive team folders in here. The reason they're showing up for me is I actually have permission through DSM to those folders. So if I go into Control Panel over here, Shared Folder, Management, you will see that under my permissions, I'm logged in with Will. I have read-write to it. And so it shows up in a team folder. If Sally were to log in, Sally has no access, so Sally would actually not see this folder at all under team folders. So it's completely hidden from them. And right here, it works very similar to how any other Google Drive works essentially. You can actually upload files directly through this interface if you want to. So it'll just go ahead and upload straight into there. You can also right click and share a file with somebody, either locally where it's only people who have a user account on the NAS, or publicly where anybody with a link can view, and you can set up passwords and expirations on that as well. And so this right here is that same Google Drive interface that a lot of people really like. But there's one other thing that is currently not here, that personal folder. So for example, if you're a family and you want everybody just have their own space to stick stuff, this is great for your own photo backups, your own documents. You just don't want cluttering up other people's space. That's where the home folder is great. So we're going to go in and just enable that. And by default, it'll actually ask you to enable it when you install this for the very first time. And so most people already have this enabled. So to enable it, if it's disabled, you go into Users and Group, Advanced, scroll down to Enable Users Home Service, and just hit Apply. So now, as soon as we do that, we're going to be able to refresh right here. And boom, it's immediately enabled as a Synology Drive folder. And now if I refresh my actual web app right here, we'll see that we've got My Drive. And this is unique to whoever signed in. The team folders are all going to be shared. So if I drop a file in management and Sally has access to management, she's going to see the exact same management folder as I do. But if she's logged in with Sally, she's going to see Sally's drive and not mine. And that's all going to be under the home folder. So we'll just go ahead and create a new folder. And just to show this on the other end, we can go into FileStation and see that actually under the Homes folder, this is what was created. So every single user on the NAS gets their own home folder, and they're all stored in the Homes folder. Only admins can see this. Then I'm signed in with user Will. So if I look at my home folder, boom, this is that demo folder I created right there. So it's just another view of your home folder. They're the exact same thing. It's just presented in a slightly different way. And so this is where you can really have your own stuff. And I like that a lot, though you do have to understand it before using it. Don't stick stuff in here and expect other people to be able to access it unless you're sharing it through Synology Drive. But in general, you really want to keep shared files in a team folder because it makes everything a lot easier. All right, so now while we're in here, let's also go check out the Synology Office component of this. This is where you've got essentially a ability to build Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Google Slides, I think they're called. So you can go ahead and basically create the exact same setup here. Now, it's not like they're compatible or anything. They're both just very similar setups. So we go ahead and create a new document. You can go ahead and name it. Other than the fact that I can't type, it works pretty similar to how you would expect things to work. You can comment. If you use Synology Chat, you can use that here as well to talk about stuff. You've got your fonts. It's not a perfect word processor, but it actually works pretty decently. You can go ahead and you see it's constantly saving every single time I do anything. It saves within a matter of seconds. So it's just like that. You don't even hit save to close. Instead, you just close it as soon as you're done. And then when we open it back up, voila, it's right there. You can also go ahead and view your version history, though we do not have really anything here just yet. Now, this also works where if this was in a team folder, multiple people would be able to edit it at the exact same time and you'd see their cursors just like you do in Google Drive. You also have the ability to download it as a Word document or a PDF, super useful. I really recommend anytime you send a business a file, PDF it, just because PDFs always work. Obviously, if they need to edit it, a Word document probably works better for that. But in general, PDF stuff, because PDFs always send the exact same way, whereas Word documents and other stuff just do not. You can also choose where to move it to. So I could actually drop this in the management folder if I wanted to. You can also just rename it up here. And all the very, very, very basic stuff here. It's actually pretty decent for what it is. And they've put, honestly, a lot of calories into it, and it shows. So this is actually a pretty useful tool, though I don't think right now a lot of people are using it just yet. So we can see it is on in there. You also have the ability to use your recent folders. So this is stuff that you have recently modified and opened up. You can see your shared with me and shared with others. So if something's in my drive and I want somebody else to be able to access it, just like Google Drive, you can hit share. And there are two different options, permissions and public link. If you want to share it directly and only that one user can do it, you actually use the permissions. You can either just create a link and anybody with the link can view it, who's got an account on the NAS, or private, where you actually get to say a specific user or group can do whatever they want with it. And there's different options here, manager, all the way up to just previewer. And here is actually what tells you what options they have. So it's pretty much anything you would need right there. And so then Sally would see under her shared with me, this demo folder right here. And because I put her as a manager, she would be able to actually modify things. And so that is where you can get that same level of permissions. You can also star and add labels and all that good stuff. And so you can get really organized if you'd like it to. And so that is the overall web interface. But what most people actually want to use is actually the computer version, where it's on your phone and also on your desktop. And to set this up, to make this easiest, we're going to be using QuickConnect. There's a bunch of options there if you want to use QuickConnect or not. I cover in other videos, but especially if you are a home user just setting this up, enabling QuickConnect makes this very easy. So I'm just going to create a QuickConnect ID. And then right here, we've now got it set up. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my Synology Drive app. I've actually already got it up here. If you've not installed it, you should do that. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a new Synology Drive share sync task. If you are on macOS, you need to be on macOS 14.2, I believe, to use the on-demand sync, but we're going to talk about that here in a minute. So first off, let's go ahead and just create a new one. And the first time you install Synology Drive, you'll get this. You'll also see whenever you open up Synology Drive for the first time, in the lower right-hand corner, it says, get the desktop and mobile apps, and it's got a link to download them. Otherwise, you go to the downloads page. So right here, we're going to go ahead and set up a new one. And this screen right here is actually what you see if you're setting up a new NAS and you've not set up Synology Drive before. Since this laptop's already using Synology Drive to my NAS, it actually already has it in there. In general, you would just see this. So we're going to say DS923 demo, which is our QuickConnect ID over here. The windows are on top of each other. DS923 demo, so we're using that exact same one. And then we're just going to sign in with our username and password. All right, so now that you've signed in, you get this interface right here. This is a sync job. We'll also talk about backup tasks in a second here. Sync jobs are exactly what they sound like. They sync the NAS with your computer. And if you see this option right here, on-demand sync allows it to not actually take up space on your computer. On macOS, this actually just uses the iCloud protocol. On Windows, it works very similar. We are going to go ahead and choose our home folder, which is our My Drive folder. We're going to enable on-demand sync. If we want to do a full sync where all the files are always on our computer, we could choose a folder. And if you're on Windows, you choose a folder no matter what. My recommendation for people who are doing that is to go ahead and hit change, put it in your folder or wherever you want it to go, and then don't check this create empty Synology Drive folder. Instead, create your own folder and uncheck it like that. So the reason I like to do that is because now I can choose exactly what it's called and everything like that versus just Synology Drive. Note, if you uncheck this and you put it in a folder like your will folder, it's going to copy everything up to the NAS. So if you're going to do that, I would highly recommend either creating an empty folder like I just did there, leaving this checked so it will create an empty folder for you, or knowing that you in fact want everything synced. And for Windows users, this is actually how you're going to set up on-demand sync as well. So Windows users can toggle back and forth between on-demand sync and full sync. macOS users cannot. macOS users have to either set it up as on-demand sync or full sync because it uses an entirely separate protocol. So since I'm on macOS, instead I'm just going to hit enable on-demand sync and give it a task name. So it's going to show up in our sidebar as Synology Drive-home. If you've only got one drive hooked up with Synology Drive on-demand sync, it'll show up as just Synology Drive. And now we're going to hit done. So now we can go ahead and click on this, and we will see it in Finder right here. So if you're on macOS and you're setting up for the very first time, you'll have to hit enable, but I've already set this up before. And so we'll see right over here to the left, we see it right here, and we see the same cloud icon, where files are not actually stored on our computer until we double click on it. But we can still interact with these files exactly as we would with anything else. So let me just go ahead and dump a screenshot or two in here. And it's working exactly like a regular file station is, except it is only downloading files when we double click on them. So we'll see that when I made that modification. Boom, right there. It is automatically uploaded and they stay in sync. You can also share directly out of this by saying get link, and you can actually create a public link directly from here. So you probably will want to use your QuickConnect. If you're using a different method, you can use that. But this right here will allow you to create a link that people can actually access and see. So I'm going to open up a new private browser to not be logged in to show that it works when you're not logged into a computer. Voila, that is what an external user would see. Note, this is currently slow because a private browser on Safari uses iCloud Private Relay, and so it's not connecting locally. Long story, but it would be faster if I was not on a private browser or if I had the ports open, but I'm going to talk about that at the end. And so that's exactly how this works. You can also tell it to automatically download the file by saying pin local copy permanently. That will always have it pinned until you tell it otherwise. And you can also say free up space, which will say, okay, delete any files locally, but they'll still be in the cloud. So I can say free up space on the parent level folder. And we'll see right here that the cloud icon comes back, but you still get a JPEG preview. It's a very small preview. And as soon as we double click on it, we're going to see it download and it opens the full resolution file. So it's very useful in that sense, and it literally uses the iCloud protocol for this on Mac OS. Windows, once again, is working very similar. You can also choose team folders for this as well. Now let's go in, and we can go in and add in more settings. We also have the ability to come in and do a backup task. And backup tasks can be pretty useful because you can just say, okay, I just want to be able to back up this folder, this folder, this folder, and this folder, and to a specified location. So say I want to be able to back up I'll do my pictures folder. You've got options here for how you'd like to do it. If you're doing something with like Lightroom or something that has a database on it, don't do continuous, instead do a schedule. So we can say daily, once a day. And now what it's going to do is it's just going to back up all that data directly to our My Drive folder. Though you will note one thing, I don't believe it will show up. Yeah, it will not show up in your Synology Drive My Drive folder. So backup tasks are the one thing that don't show up in your Synology Drive folder, just because that would be recursive and confusing. So instead, they're only going to show up on the web interface and on the Homes folder, but specifically through Synology Drive On Demand Sync, they don't show up here. But we can just view those files. Voila. Just like that, you can see everything in there, and it's just going to always be backing that up once a day. You'll also see in these logs often that you will see a bunch of failures with macOS. They're going to be things like thumbs.db or .ds stores. Those things, don't worry about it because they are not really useful files or needed. If it's an actual file that you recognize, then check out what happened. But a lot of times you'll just get notified for that, and those are files that just don't need to be synced. All right, and so that is how the Synology Drive client works. I think it works really well, and QuickConnect makes this a lot easier. Now, I do want to finally touch on, at the end of this video, how to speed this up. So this is going to work very quickly when we're on our local network because it's going to have a direct connection to the NAS. But when we're outside of our local network, Synology Drive, this client right here, uses port 6690 to speed things up. So if you're looking for the fastest possible speeds and you don't want to worry about setting up a VPN server and things like that are pretty complex and in a lot of ways overkill for home users, check out how to open up port 6690 TCP from the router to the NAS. And if you want to be able to share files with people very quickly through this web interface right here, that is going to use port 5001 by default. And so that is a very useful thing to have. So if you don't know about how port forwarding works, we've got a video linked in the description below. The last thing I do want to talk about is some of the useful things that you can also do in here that are great new features under advanced features that we'll go ahead and activate. So this is similar to how Active Backup for Business activates. You basically just have to sign in with a Synology account and say, yes, I do have it. It's not like it costs money or anything. I think they just restrict it because it's open source software and this is their secret sauce that they actually kind of put behind a wall. So once you activate it, you've got options that are really useful for businesses. So if you're going to be letting an employee go, you can actually remotely wipe their Synology Drive stuff beforehand so they don't have anything downloaded to their computer. You can also say, okay, add a watermark anytime something gets downloaded, or you can restrict downloads. There's a lot of useful features here, and they're set up on a team folder basis. So if I wanted to come in here and say, I'm letting myself go, and I want to make sure that none of the files are stored on their computer before doing so, I can actually hit unlink here, and then there's this option right here to remote wipe it as soon as they come online. So this is not going to wipe out their entire computer. It's only going to remove the Synology Drive synced folders when it comes online. So that is useful. Obviously, you have to make that very clear to your employees if you're doing this on their personal laptops. I'm not going to go into the morals and logistics and the legalities of that, but that feature is there and it's very useful, especially if you need to be able to make sure you maintain these files. Obviously, this does not keep people from being able to move files out of this folder beforehand, but it is a nice tool in the bag for specific use cases. You can also come in here under settings and actually restrict out who's allowed to share files, that they have to use password protection. You can see a shared link report of everybody who's downloaded and everyone that's been sent. You can choose a specific customized link. I generally recommend QuickConnect if you're set up with that. If you've got a special domain, you can use that as well. You also can say who is allowed to sync specific stuff. There is a ton of useful settings in here. And if you're using a C2 hybrid share, you can actually choose a few users who actually use C2 to sync with Synology Drive rather than the actual local computer. And there's a bunch of other stuff here that can be very, very useful. They've made this almost Google Drive level abilities to administrate. And you can even say, okay, this person's quitting. I need to transfer all their files to this person, which is really, really nice to have and keeps things going very well. All right, so there's obviously a ton more stuff here, but that is pretty much the gist for how to get set up and going. I really like using Synology Drive on-demand sync to just have access to all your files really easily. It works great in Windows and about 99% there in macOS. There's always some hiccups, but for most people who are just using basic files, it works phenomenally, and I've started using it more and more. If you have any questions or you want to hire me, there's a link for that down in the description below, and put your questions down in the comments below. All right, have a good one. Bye.